The Valari Empire had ruled the galaxy for 8,000 years. They had conquered 11,000 worlds across the stars. No species had ever defeated them. No world had ever fought back and won. The Valari believed they were the masters of all living things, and the galaxy had given them no reason to think otherwise. When their ships came to Earth, they expected the same easy victory they had found everywhere else. High Commander Zorth stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the small blue planet on his screen. His officers had told him about the humans. They were a young species. They had only recently learned to leave their own world. Their technology was primitive. Their weapons were weak. They would fall like all the others. Zorth smiled. This would be a simple conquest. Perhaps the easiest of his long career. On a warm June morning, 300 Valari battlecruisers descended through Earth's atmosphere. People in cities around the world stopped and looked up. The massive ships blocked out the sun. They hung in the sky like mountains made of metal, each 1 mile long, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy entire nations. The Valari broadcast a message in every human language. The translation was simple: surrender within 6 days or face total destruction. There would be no negotiation. There would be no discussion. Humans would become subjects of the Empire, or humans would die. In New York, people ran through the streets in panic. In Tokyo, crowds gathered and stared at the sky in silence. In London, the government held emergency meetings that solved nothing. Around the world, billions of people felt the same cold fear. They were not alone in the universe, and the beings who had found them were not friendly. Jake Morrison was 34 years old. He came from a small town in Ohio where nothing exciting ever happened. He had joined the Navy because he wanted to see the world. Now he was seeing something much stranger. Jake served as lieutenant commander on the submarine USS Relentless. When the aliens arrived, the Relentless was deep in the Pacific Ocean, hidden beneath miles of dark water. Jake and his crew watched the news broadcasts on their screens. They saw the alien ships. They heard the demands for surrender. His communications officer was a woman named Claire Bennett. She was smart and quick, with short dark hair and eyes that never missed anything. Claire had been working on the alien transmissions since they started. She called Jake over to her station. Her face was serious but also excited. "Sir, I've been listening to their tactical communications," Claire said. "They're not encrypted well. I can understand some of it." Jake leaned in to look at her screen. "What are they saying?" "They're not worried about us at all. Their ships have minimal power to weapons. Their crews are relaxed. They think this is already over. They think we're going to surrender without a fight." Jake was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the data on Claire's screen. The aliens were overconfident. They had conquered so many worlds that they had forgotten what a real fight looked like. They expected humans to be like all the others, but Jake knew something the Valari did not know. He knew human history. Humans had been fighting each other since the beginning of time. They had invented countless ways to kill, to resist, to survive against impossible odds. They had fought guerrilla wars and world wars. They had never stopped finding new ways to hurt their enemies. The Valari had technology, but humans had 10,000 years of practice at the art of war. "Get me a secure line to command," Jake said. "I have an idea." Far away, in a bunker beneath the mountains of Switzerland, the leaders of the world had gathered. For the first time in human history, there were no enemies in that room. Americans sat next to Russians. Chinese officers spoke with Indian generals. Old grudges and ancient hatreds meant nothing now. They were all just humans, facing something that wanted to destroy them all. General Patricia Holloway of the United States stood at the front of the room. She was 61 years old, with gray hair and hard eyes. She had served in 3 wars. She had seen friends die. She had ordered men into battles they did not survive. Nothing in her life had prepared her for this, but she was not going to show fear. "We cannot beat them in a straight fight," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "Their ships are too powerful. Their weapons are too advanced. If we try to fight them the way they expect, we will lose." The room was silent. Everyone knew she was right. "But we are not going to fight them the way they expect," Patricia continued. "We are going to fight them the way humans have always fought stronger enemies. We will hide. We will strike from shadows. We will make them pay for every inch of our world in blood." A Russian general named Petrov spoke up. "They will destroy our cities. Millions will die. Millions will die if we surrender too," Patricia replied. "The Valari do not treat their subjects well. We have intercepted their communications. The species they conquer become slaves. They work until they die. Their children are taken and raised to serve the Empire. If we surrender, we survive as a species, but we stop being human." She looked around the room at the faces of men and women from every nation on Earth. "I would rather die fighting than live as a slave. And I believe our people feel the same way." In submarines around the world, in secret bunkers, in hidden military bases, humans began to plan. They shared everything they knew. The Americans told the Russians about their secret weapons. The Chinese showed the Europeans their hidden research. There were no more secrets between nations. There was only humanity, united for the first time, preparing to fight. Jake Morrison's message reached General Holloway. His idea was simple but dangerous. The aliens were not taking humans seriously. Their ships had weak defenses because they did not expect an attack. If humans could strike fast and hard, they might capture an alien vessel. They could learn its technology. They could find its weaknesses. It was a terrible risk. If they failed, the Valari would destroy them. But if they did nothing, the Valari would conquer them anyway. Patricia made her decision. "Tell Morrison to prepare his plan. And tell him this. If he survives, I want to buy him a drink." The clock was ticking. In 6 days, the Valari expected humanity to kneel. Instead, humanity was sharpening its knives. The aliens had made a mistake. They had threatened a species that did not know how to give up. Now they would learn what that meant. The war for Earth was about to begin. 5 days had passed since the Valari arrived. High Commander Zorith was growing impatient. The humans had not surrendered. They had stopped moving their military forces, which his officers said was a sign of defeat. But no official surrender had come. Zorith decided to send a message. He would show these primitives what happened to those who made the Empire wait. He ordered a single cruiser to descend toward New York City. The ship would destroy several blocks of buildings. It would kill thousands of humans. After that, Zorith believed the rest would fall in line. Fear was the greatest weapon of the Empire, and he had used it on 100 worlds before. The cruiser began its descent. It was 2 miles long, made of black metal that seemed to eat the light. Its weapons powered up, ready to turn stone and steel and flesh into ash. The ship never reached its target. 3 submarines had been waiting in the waters of New York Harbor. Jake Morrison commanded the operation from the Relentless. 2 other submarines flanked his position. They had been sitting in silence for 3 days, waiting for this moment. "Fire," Jake said. 6 torpedoes launched from the submarines. But these were not ordinary torpedoes. In the days since the invasion, human scientists had worked without sleep. They had taken nuclear warheads and modified them. They had added devices that would create a massive burst of electrical energy when the bombs exploded. The scientists believed this might damage the alien ships. They were not certain. No one had ever tested such a weapon against alien technology. The torpedoes struck the cruiser's hull. 6 nuclear explosions lit up the sky over New York. The electromagnetic pulse spread through the alien ship like a wave of poison. The cruiser did not explode, but every system on board went dark. The massive ship, suddenly without power, began to fall. It crashed into the Atlantic Ocean 2 miles from shore. The impact created waves that flooded parts of the city, but the ship was intact, and 1,200 Valari crew members were still alive inside. Jake Morrison watched from his periscope. He felt his heart pounding in his chest. They had done it. They had brought down an alien ship. "Get the boarding teams ready," he said into his radio. "We're going in." Within the hour, Navy SEALs and Marine units reached the crashed cruiser. The ship was lying on its side in shallow water, half submerged. Smoke rose from holes in its hull. Strange sounds came from inside, like machines trying and failing to restart. Lieutenant Danny Ortega led the first team through a breach in the hull. He was 28 years old, born in San Antonio, Texas. He had trained for many things, but fighting aliens was not one of them. Still, he was a Marine, and Marines adapted. The inside of the ship was dark and strange. The corridors were too tall and too wide, built for beings larger than humans. Emergency lights flickered in alien colors. The air smelled like nothing Danny had ever experienced before. The Valari crew tried to fight back. They were tall beings, 8 feet or more, with gray skin and 4 arms. They carried weapons that shot beams of burning light. But they had never fought in close quarters. They had never faced an enemy that would board their ships. In all their conquests, they had killed from a distance. They did not know how to fight hand-to-hand. The Marines did. The battle inside the cruiser lasted 2 hours. When it was over, 400 Valari were dead, and the rest had surrendered. 12 Marines had died. But humanity had won its first victory against the Empire. Human engineers swarmed into the captured ship. They took apart everything they could find. Dr. Lisa Grant, a physicist from MIT, led a team that studied the alien power systems. She was 40 years old, with tired eyes and hands that never stopped moving. She had not slept in 4 days. "They use a type of energy we have never seen," she told General Holloway in a video call. "But I can understand the principles. Give me time, and I can build versions of their technology." "How much time?" Patricia asked. "Months. Maybe years. You have weeks. Do your best." On his flagship, High Commander Zorath received the news of the lost cruiser. For a long moment, he did not speak. His officers stood in silence, afraid to move. A Valari warship had been brought down by primitives. It had been boarded. Its crew had been killed or captured. This had never happened before. In 8,000 years of conquest, no species had ever taken a Valari vessel. Zorath's shock turned to rage. "Destroy them," he ordered. "Destroy their cities. Make them pay." 12 cities burned that day: Beijing, Moscow, Cairo, Buenos Aires, Sydney, and others. Kinetic bombardments fell from the sky, rods of metal moving faster than any bullet. Each impact was like a nuclear explosion, but without the radiation. Millions of people died in moments. The Valari expected this to break human resistance. They expected the survivors to come crawling, begging for mercy, offering their complete surrender. Instead, every nation on Earth declared total war. Factories that had made cars began making weapons. Scientists who had studied medicine began studying alien technology. Schools closed so that teachers could train in combat. Old soldiers came out of retirement. Young people who had never held a gun learned to shoot. The deaths of millions had not broken humanity. It had united them in rage. In the ruins of Moscow, a Russian woman named Natasha pulled her dead child from the rubble. She held the small body and wept. Then she put her child down, picked up a gun from a fallen soldier, and walked toward the nearest alien patrol. She killed 3 Valari before they brought her down. Stories like this repeated across the world. Humans did not flee from the aliens. They attacked them. They ambushed them. They died by the thousands, but they took Valari soldiers with them. Jake Morrison received a field promotion. He was now a commander in charge of a special task force. His mission was to strike Valari positions and disappear before they could respond. Claire Bennett served as his intelligence officer. Danny Ortega, who had survived the cruiser assault, joined his team as ground combat leader. They gathered in a hidden base beneath the Rocky Mountains. The base had been built during the Cold War, designed to survive nuclear attacks. Now it sheltered the humans who would carry the fight to the invaders. Jake stood before his team. They were soldiers from a dozen countries, men and women who had lost families and friends to the Valari attacks. They wanted revenge. But Jake knew revenge alone would not win this war. They have conquered 11,000 worlds, he said. They have never lost a war. That is their weakness. His team looked confused. How is that a weakness? They have never lost because no one has ever really fought them, Jake explained. Every other species gave up. They surrendered when they saw they could not win. But humans are different. We do not surrender. We do not know how. He pointed to a map on the wall. It showed Valari positions across the planet. They do not know how to fight an enemy that will not quit. They do not know what to do when the people they conquered keep fighting. We are going to show them. We are going to make them afraid. Claire stepped forward. I have been monitoring their communications. They are confused. Their commanders keep asking for instructions on how to handle resistance. They do not have a plan for this. They never needed one. Danny cracked his knuckles. So we hit them hard and keep hitting them until they break. Jake nodded. We cannot beat them in open battle. But we can bleed them. We can make every day on Earth cost them more than they are willing to pay. And while we do that, our scientists will catch up to their technology. He looked at his team. These men and women would probably die. They all knew it. But they were going to fight anyway. The Valari think this war is almost over, Jake said. They are wrong. This war is just beginning. 6 months had passed since the Valari invaded Earth. The aliens controlled the surface of the planet. Their ships flew overhead. Their soldiers walked the streets of ruined cities. But they did not rule. They could not rule. Because everywhere they went, humans were waiting to kill them. High Commander Zorath had lost more soldiers in 6 months on Earth than the Empire had lost in the previous 100 years of conquest. Every patrol that left a base might not return. Every supply convoy was a target. Every night brought new attacks from enemies that seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish just as quickly. The Valari had no answer for this. In their experience, conquered species accepted their fate. They worked. They obeyed. They did not hide bombs in the roads. They did not attack from rooftops with captured weapons. They did not send children to distract guards while adults moved in for the kill. Humans did all of these things and more. Jake Morrison led his task force in strikes across North America. They hit Valari command posts and ammunition stores. They rescued prisoners and stole supplies. They killed officers and destroyed communication towers. And every time the Valari sent forces to catch them, Jake and his team were already gone. Claire Bennett had cracked the Valari communication codes. She could read their messages, hear their orders, understand their plans. This gave the human resistance an advantage that the aliens did not even know they had lost. They are requesting more troops, Claire told Jake one night. They were hiding in an abandoned mine in Colorado, planning their next operation. Zorath has asked the Empire for reinforcements. What did they say? Jake asked. Claire smiled, though there was no humor in it. They refused. The Empire does not believe that a primitive species can really threaten an Imperial fleet. They think Zorath is exaggerating. They told him to solve the problem himself. Jake nodded slowly. This was good news. The Empire's arrogance might save humanity. In a laboratory hidden beneath what had once been Chicago, Dr. Lisa Grant worked on the secrets of Valari technology. She had not slept more than 3 hours a night in months. Her eyes were red, and her hands shook from too much coffee. But her mind was sharp, and she was making progress. The shield technology that protected Valari ships had seemed like magic at first. But Lisa had taken it apart, piece by piece, until she understood how it worked. She had found a weakness. The shields work by creating a field of energy that stops physical objects. She explained to General Holloway in a secure video call. But the field has limits. If we can match the frequency of the field exactly, we can create weapons that pass through it. Patricia leaned forward. You can make weapons that ignore their shields? I believe so. I need more time to test it. But yes, I think it can be done. How long? Lisa rubbed her tired eyes. A month. Maybe less. In the occupied city of Paris, a young woman named Sophie Martin organized a resistance cell. She was 23 years old, a university student before the invasion. Now she was a leader of fighters. Her group operated from the sewers beneath the city. They emerged at night to plant bombs, ambush patrols, and spread messages of hope. The Valari had killed her parents in the first wave of attacks. She had sworn to make them pay, and she was keeping that promise. One night, Sophie's group captured a Valari officer. He was a minor commander, in charge of a small patrol. They brought him to their underground hideout for questioning. The officer looked at Sophie with confusion in his strange, dark eyes. Why do you fight? He asked. His translator device made his words understandable. You cannot win. Your world has fallen. Your resistance only causes more death for your own people. Sophie stared at him. You really do not understand, do you? I understand that you are being illogical. The Empire is inevitable. Resistance is pointless. No, Sophie said. What is pointless is a life without freedom. We fight because we would rather die than be your slaves. We fight because our children deserve better. We fight because we are human, and fighting is what humans do. The officer shook his head. Your species is insane. Sophie smiled. Maybe, but we are winning. She was right. Slowly, day by day, the tide was turning. The weapons Lisa Grant developed worked. Human soldiers began using guns that could punch through Valari shields. The advantage the aliens had enjoyed since the beginning was fading in space. Things were changing too. Human scientists had learned how to use Valari engines. They had captured enough ships to build a small fleet. It was nothing compared to the Valari Armada, but it was a start. Jake Morrison was promoted again. He was now in charge of the most daring operation of the war, an assault on High Commander. Zorath's flagship. The plan was insane. Jake knew it. Everyone who heard it knew it. But insane plans were the only kind that worked against an enemy like the Valari. Using captured shuttles and stolen access codes, Jake's team would board the flagship. They would plant explosives in the critical systems. They would kill Zorath himself if possible. And then they would escape before the ship exploded. Claire Bennett would control the operation from a hidden base, feeding false information to the Valari sensors. Danny Ortega would lead the combat team. Jake would coordinate everything from one of the captured shuttles. This is probably a one-way mission, Jake told his team before they launched. I will not order anyone to come. Only volunteers. Every single member of his team stepped forward. They launched at midnight. 3 shuttles, moving silently through space, approaching the massive Valari flagship. The ship was 10 miles long, a mountain of metal and weapons. It should have been impossible to infiltrate, but Claire had done her job well. The sensors showed nothing. The shuttles docked without triggering any alarms. Danny led his team through the corridors of the ship. They moved like ghosts, killing guards silently, placing charges on power systems and weapon controls. The Valari crew had no idea death was walking among them. Jake found Zorath in his command center. The High Commander was alone, studying reports of the endless troubles his invasion had caused. He did not hear Jake enter. He did not know anything was wrong until he felt the cold metal of a gun against the back of his head. "High Commander Zorath," Jake said quietly. "Humanity sends its regards." The explosion that followed was visible from Earth. The flagship broke apart in a ball of fire. And with it died the command structure of the entire invasion fleet. Jake and most of his team escaped on their shuttles. Danny took a wound but survived. Claire guided them home through the chaos. The Valari fleet, suddenly without leadership, fell into confusion. Some ships fled. Some tried to continue fighting. Some surrendered to human forces. The great empire, undefeated for 8,000 years, had finally met a species it could not break. General Holloway broadcast a message to the remaining Valari ships. "Leave our world. Never come back. This is your only warning." Most of them ran. In cities across Earth, humans looked up at the sky and saw the alien ships departing. They had won. Against all odds, against an enemy with technology far beyond their own, they had won. But Jake Morrison knew the war was not over. The Valari Empire was still out there. They would return with more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. Earth had won a battle. The real war was just beginning. He stood on the deck of a captured Valari cruiser, looking out at the stars. "We are coming for you," he said quietly. "We are coming for all of you." 1 year after the invasion began, the last Valari ship fled Earth's solar system. The planet was scarred and broken. Nearly 3 billion people had died. Most cities were ruins. But humanity had survived. More than survived. Humanity had won. The rebuilding began immediately. Factories rose from the rubble. Hospitals opened in tents and basements. Farms started producing food again. Humans were good at rebuilding. They had been doing it after their own wars for thousands of years. But this time, something was different. This time, humanity was not just rebuilding. They were preparing. The Valari had left behind 17 intact warships. Human engineers studied them day and night. Dr. Lisa Grant led a team that took apart the alien engines and put them back together again. They learned how the ships moved faster than light. They learned how the weapons worked. They learned how to build their own. 3 years after the invasion, the first human starship launched from Cape Canaveral. It was not a copy of a Valari vessel. It was something new, something that combined alien technology with human creativity. The ship was faster and more powerful than anything the Valari had ever built. They called it the Hope. Captain Maria Santos commanded the Hope. She was 42 years old, a former Air Force pilot. She had lost her entire family when Los Angeles was destroyed. For 3 years, she had trained for this moment. She had studied Valari tactics. She had learned to fly their ships. She had prepared herself to take the war to the enemy. Jake Morrison served as her executive officer. He had spent the years after the invasion building the new fleet and training new crews. Claire Bennett came along as intelligence officer. Danny Ortega, recovered from his wounds, led the Marine detachment. The Hope's mission was simple: go into Valari space and learn everything they could. Find the enemy's weaknesses. Find their strength. And if possible, find allies. They did not expect to find what they found. The Hope traveled for weeks, jumping from star to star, always careful to avoid Valari patrol routes. They passed through empty systems and dead worlds. They saw the remains of civilizations that had been conquered and forgotten. Then they reached a planet called Keth. Keth had been conquered by the Valari 500 years ago. Its people, the Chithari, had been slaves ever since. They worked in mines and factories, producing goods for the Empire. Their children were taken at birth and raised in training camps. Their culture was dying. Their hope was gone, until they heard about Earth. When the Hope entered orbit around Keth, the crew received a message. It was in the Cathari language, which Claire had learned from captured Valari databases. Are you the humans? Are you the ones who defeated the Empire? Maria answered carefully. We are humans. We drove the Valari from our world. Who is asking? My name is Toro. I speak for the resistance on Keth. We have been waiting for you. We have been waiting for so long. The Hope landed in secret, hidden in a mountain range far from Valari eyes. Toro came to meet them with a dozen of his people. They were shorter than humans, with blue skin and large dark eyes. They had been broken by centuries of slavery. But when they looked at Maria and her crew, something changed in their faces. Something that might have been hope. We heard the stories, Toro said. A young species, barely advanced enough to travel between stars. They were invaded by the Empire. They were supposed to fall in days. But they did not fall. They fought. They won. They killed a high commander. He reached out and touched Maria's hand, as if making sure she was real. We thought it was impossible, he whispered. We thought no one could fight the Empire. But you did. You proved that they can be beaten. Maria looked at Jake, then back at Toro. We did not do anything special. We just refused to give up. That is exactly what is special, Toro said. We have forgotten how to do that. Our people have not resisted in generations. We did not think resistance was possible. But now, because of you, we are beginning to remember. In the weeks that followed, the crew of the Hope met with resistance leaders from a dozen conquered species. Word had spread across the galaxy. The story of Earth had become a legend. And that legend was inspiring people who had given up long ago. Claire Bennett worked with the rebel groups, teaching them what humans had learned about fighting the Valari. Guerrilla tactics, sabotage, information warfare. The ugly skills that humans had developed through centuries of fighting each other. You do not need to beat them in open battle, Claire told a gathering of alien resistance fighters. You just need to make ruling you more trouble than it is worth. Strike and fade. Attack their supplies. Kill their officers. Never give them a target they can destroy. Make them bleed slowly, day after day, until they decide to leave. The aliens listened with wide eyes. These ideas were new to them. The Valari had conquered so completely that the concept of continuing to fight after defeat had simply disappeared from their cultures. Jake Morrison spoke to a group of young rebels from a species called the Turani. They were tall and thin, with skin like polished stone. The Empire had taken their world 800 years ago. We are not stronger than the Valari, Jake said. We are not smarter. We do not have better weapons. What we have is something else. We have 10,000 years of practice at killing each other. We have invented every terrible thing that one thinking being can do to another. And now we are going to use all of that experience against the Empire. A young Turani raised his hand. But how did you keep fighting when you were losing? When your cities burned? When millions died? How did you not give up? Jake thought about the question for a long moment. Humans are stubborn, he said finally. We do not know how to surrender. It is not in our nature. When you push us, we push back. When you hurt us, we get angry. When you tell us something is impossible, we try to do it anyway. The Valari have ruled for 8,000 years because no one ever really challenged them. We are going to be the species that changes that. The rebellion spread faster than anyone expected. On world after world, beings who had accepted slavery for generations began to rise up. They planted bombs in Valari facilities. They sabotaged equipment. They killed soldiers and officers. They used the tactics that humans had taught them. The Valari Empire, which had been stable for thousands of years, suddenly found itself facing fires on 100 fronts. Their forces were spread thin. Their commanders did not know how to respond. This had never happened before. Maria Santos sent a message back to Earth. General Holloway received it in the rebuilt command center in Washington. "The galaxy is ready to fight," Maria reported. "But they need help. They need weapons. They need training. They need ships. If we support them, the Empire will fall. I am certain of it." Patricia Holloway looked at the message for a long time. Then she called a meeting of the world's leaders. "We have a choice," she told them. "We can stay on Earth and rebuild our world. We can hide and hope the Valari forget about us. Or we can take the war to them. We can free the galaxy and make sure no one ever threatens Earth again." The vote was unanimous. Earth would build a fleet. Earth would go to war. And this time, Earth would not stop until the Valari Empire was nothing but a memory. The counter-invasion had begun. 5 years after the Valari invaded Earth, the war came to an end above the alien homeworld itself. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the carrier, Victory, and watched the enemy fleet gather. The Valari had pulled every ship they could find to defend their home planet. 3,000 warships formed a wall of metal and fire between the Allied fleet and Velar, but the Allies had come with 5,000 ships. Human vessels flew alongside craft from 30 liberated species. The Cathari were there, and the Turani, and a dozen others whose names humans were still learning to pronounce. They had all come to finish what Earth had started. Maria Santos commanded the assault wings from her flagship, the New Hope. Claire Bennett coordinated communications across the entire Allied fleet, making sure that species who had never worked together could fight as one. Danny Ortega waited with his Marines, ready to board the enemy ships and take the fight to close quarters. Jake opened a channel to the entire fleet. 5 years ago, the Valari thought they could conquer Earth in less than a week. They thought we would surrender. They thought we would break. They were wrong. He paused, looking at the stars on his screen. Today, we end their empire. Not for revenge. Not for glory. We end it so that no one will ever have to kneel before them again. We end it so that our children and the children of every species they ever conquered can live free. The battle lasted 18 hours. It was the largest space battle in the history of the galaxy. Ships exploded in balls of fire. Weapons tore through hulls. Thousands died on both sides. But the Allies had something the Valari did not have. They had learned to fight together. They had learned to sacrifice for each other. They had learned that freedom was worth dying for. One by one, the Valari ships fell. Their commanders, who had never lost a war, did not know what to do when they started losing. Some fought to the death. Some tried to flee. Some, in the end, surrendered. When the last Valari warship powered down its weapons, Jake Morrison felt something he had not felt in 5 years. He felt peace. The occupation of Velar was strange and sad. The human soldiers who walked through the streets of the alien capital saw a civilization that had ruled the galaxy for 8,000 years. They saw great buildings and beautiful art and technology beyond their imagination. And they saw people who had no idea how to exist without being in charge of everything. Dr. Lisa Grant came with the occupation force. She walked through the halls of the Valari Imperial Palace, studying their technology, learning their history. She found records that went back thousands of years. They were not always like this, she told Jake later. Long ago, they were explorers. They wanted to learn about the universe. But somewhere along the way, they became conquerors instead. They forgot what it meant to be equals with other species. Jake nodded slowly. And now they have to learn again. In the weeks that followed, the leaders of the allied species gathered to decide what would come next. Humans could have become the new rulers of the galaxy. No one would have stopped them. They had proven themselves the strongest force in known space. But humans had lived under empires before, in their own history. They knew the poison that came with absolute power. They knew that ruling over others only led to more war, more suffering, more hatred. General Patricia Holloway, now the senior human representative, spoke to the gathered aliens. "We did not fight for 5 years to become what we destroyed," she said. "We did not free 100 worlds just to put them under new chains. The age of empires is over. What comes next must be something different." They created the Galactic Federation. It was based on ideas that humans had developed over centuries of struggling with their own governments. Equal representation for every species. Laws that applied to everyone. Free trade between worlds. The right of every planet to choose its own way of life. It was not perfect. Nothing humans made was ever perfect. But it was better than what had come before. Jake Morrison retired from military service. He had spent enough of his life fighting. Now he wanted to build. He became humanity's first ambassador to the Federation. He spent years traveling from world to world, meeting species he had once fought beside, helping them learn to work together. It was harder than war in some ways. But it was also more important. Claire Bennett led the Federation's intelligence community. Her job was to watch for threats, to make sure no new empire rose to threaten the peace. She was good at it. She had spent years learning to understand alien minds, and now she used that knowledge to keep everyone safe. Maria Santos took command of the Federation peacekeeping fleet. If any world was threatened, she was there to help. If any dispute turned violent, she was there to stop it. She had fought her whole life. Now she fought to prevent others from having to do the same. Danny Ortega returned to Earth. He had seen enough of the galaxy. He wanted to go home. He became a teacher, training the next generation of soldiers who would hopefully never have to fight a war like the one he had survived. Dr. Lisa Grant founded a university on Vuller itself. She gathered scientists from every species and taught them to share their knowledge. The secrets that the Villari had kept for themselves were now open to everyone. The galaxy began to advance faster than ever before. Earth itself became something it had never been before, united. The nations remained with their different languages and cultures and traditions, but they worked together now. The old hatreds seemed foolish after what they had been through together. On the 10th anniversary of the invasion, Jake Morrison gave his final public speech. He stood in the rebuilt city of New York, looking out at a crowd of humans and aliens who had come to remember. 10 years ago, the Villari came to conquer us. They saw a weak and divided species. They expected us to kneel. He smiled, though his eyes were tired. They were wrong about everything. We were not weak. We were just waiting for something worth fighting for. We were not divided. We just needed a reason to come together. He looked up at the sky, where stars were beginning to appear in the evening light. The galaxy remembers what we did. They remember that a young species on a small blue world refused to surrender. They remember that we freed them when no one else would. They remember that we chose to share power instead of seizing it. He turned back to the crowd. We are not special. We are not chosen by any god or blessed by any fate. We are just humans. We are stubborn and angry and sometimes cruel. But we are also brave and kind and capable of more love than we know. That is what saved us. That is what will save us again, if we ever need it. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence for the 3 billion who had died. Then the crowd began to disperse, humans and aliens walking together into the night. Jake watched them go. He thought about everything that had happened. The invasion, the war, The victory. The building of something new. The Valari had made a mistake when they came to Earth. They had expected to find a primitive species, easy to control, quick to break. Instead, they had found humanity. And humanity had shaken the galaxy. Jake looked up at the stars one more time. Somewhere out there on thousands of worlds, beings who had once been slaves were now free. Children who would have been born into servitude were growing up with choices their parents never had, because humans had refused to give up. He smiled and walked home, ready at last to rest. The war was over. The future had begun.